homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. I am heading out to my raised bed garden to show you what's been happening. This is the beginning of the June farm tour. So I am gardening in Southeast Washington, Zone 7A. Our last frost is around Mother's Day, which is the first weekend in May. And then our first frost tends to be about the middle of October. So we have a pretty good long growing season here, but we get a pretty cold winter. And what you're seeing here is a green stalk, which is that tower over there. We'll go look at in a minute. And then I have a total of 6 4x8 metal raised beds. And these were purchased on Amazon. I'll put a link down below if anybody's interested. I love the Vigo beds, but they were way too expensive for me. And so I ended up going with this. And this is going on year 3, I believe, of these beds. And so they are holding up quite well. And at this point, we're mostly planted out, not completely. This bed is peppers and eggplant this year, and mostly sweet peppers. I do have some hot chili peppers, but they're out in my bigger garden. So I have 4 eggplants here. 3 of them are called Littlefinger, and one of them is Rosa Bianca. I intended to do 2 and 2, but one of the Rosa Bianca that I had, can't remember if it got dug up by a chicken or if it just conked out. And it turned out I didn't have an extra one. I think I planted this twice. I did have problems with my chickens getting into these beds this year. I've got some younger birds and I needed to trim their flight feathers, which I finally did. And I haven't had any issues, knock on wood, since then. So I am hoping that that problem has been finished. I did have all kinds of netting around this bed earlier to try to keep them out of here. I have a lot of mulch. There's leaf litter in here and there's compost in here and old worm bin compost. And so they got very excited about all of that and they were in here digging for worms. And they managed to dig out 4 of my peppers and kill them. And they also dug out these 2, which are pimento peppers. And they are still hanging on, surprisingly, because they've actually been in this state for a couple of weeks now. And they didn't kill them, but they're not terribly happy. And so we'll see what happens. I did buy an extra pimento pepper that I didn't have an extra, so I had to just go purchase one. But I have an extra pimento in here along with the eggplant. I have 1 Hungarian black, 1 jalapeno, just so that I don't have to walk all the way out to the big garden if I want a little bit of spice. And then everything else in here is sweet peppers. So I have Stocky Red Roaster and Carmen. And the chickens did kill one of my Stocky Red Roaster peppers. And so I have 5 Carmens instead of 4 and 3 Stocky Red Roasters instead of 4 because we had to move some things around and change some things up. Thank you, chickens. Little buggers. On the end here, I have a couple of celery plants and then 1 more shishito pepper over in that corner. I've grown celery for multiple years and they get quite large, and so I gave these guys quite a bit of room. In this bed, you can see our lovely borage that reseeded from last year has started to bloom and it's just gorgeous. And then the rest of this bed is garlic. I have 5 different kinds of garlic in here, maybe 6, I can't remember. The elephant garlic you can see has put up flower stalks, and I really need to come out here and trim those off, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And so those are starting to bloom. And then I'm starting to get garlic scapes on some of these. So this is a garlic scape. This is the flowering portion of a garlic if you leave it on here. And I generally you cut this off. This is edible. It's nice in a stir fry and it makes a very nice pesto. And it's only something that you get with hardneck garlic, not softneck garlic. And I have a mix of both hardneck and softneck in here. And then this lovely ferny gorgeousness is some reseeded nigella that I planted last year, never harvested because the plants were stunted and not very happy and super low to the ground. And so I just left them and never got around to harvesting it. And they have reseeded on their own and they are very, very happy this year. So I'm hoping to actually get a nice crop of Nigella, and it would be fun to just keep winter sowing this from now on, because this is clearly the way to handle this plant. I've grown it twice from seed now and not had great results, and this looks better than anything I have grown from seed by myself. I'll show you guys next month what this looks like when it's blooming, but that's been kind of a pleasant surprise. You can see I've got baby borage coming up all over in the aisles here as well. This big bed is right now, I have a couple of zucchini plants. There's 2 here and 2 over there in that back corner. These get absolutely gargantuan. They get really, really, really big, and so I'm trying to leave a lot of room for them. I will put some other stuff in here. I'm debating about what I'm gonna plant in here to fill up the rest of this space, and I still haven't made up my mind. Tucked around in corners and on the ends of beds, I have potted pots. This is a salvia that has finished blooming, and then I've got some little Johnny jump ups tucked into the end of this bed, and they're just lovely. They make me happy. I think they're so fun. They're not going to last very much longer. They don't like the heat, but I get a huge amount of enjoyment of seeing those little faces. And then tucked down the end here, this is a poppy that I got the seed at a seed swap. And so it's very happy, and I'm expecting to see a bloom come up out of that pretty soon. I got them in a little bit late, not too bad. I find that poppies will put up with a little bit of late planting. And then along the arch here, along with a Charlie, hey Charlie, hi. Along the arch here, I have peas on either side. One side is a snow pea, and the other side is a shelling pea. I believe that this one with the beautiful pink and purple flowers is the snow pea. And these guys need to hurry up. They've been in the ground since the 1st of April. And peas take quite a while. They actually are about a 70-day plant. And so that's not that fast. And they just took a very, very long time to really start growing. So they germinated quite well, and then they just sat because I don't think the soil temperature was quite what it wanted. And so they have been sitting here kind of chilling for way too long. But we have some nice flowers finally starting to come on, which means the peas will not be far behind. It usually only takes less than a week from the time you see a flower until the time you get a pea. More poppies here tucked in on the end of this bed, and a dianthus that is getting completely shaded out way down there in the corner. This bed is sweet potatoes this year, and it's been interesting to see these sweet potatoes. I started them from slips. It was a slow process. If you've ever started sweet potato slips, you know it can take quite a while. And I think I have 3 different kinds in here. There's a purple sweet potato, and they're all just store-bought sweet potatoes that I sprouted. And then there was one that I grew out 2 years ago that I, believe it or not, still had one of those in storage, and I sprouted that one. And then there's a regular orange sweet potato from the grocery store. And it's been interesting to see the difference in the growth. These have only been in the ground maybe 2 weeks, if that. They don't like cold, and we've had some kind of cold spring, blustery weather where the soil hasn't been super warm and the days haven't been super warm. We've had a lot of rain, and it hasn't been cold for like humans, but it's been cold for sweet potatoes. And what's been interesting is seeing like which one of these handled getting planted out and have started to grow and are quite happy. Like you look at this guy, that's a happy little plant. He's doing just fine. And then like this one is like a very long, skinny, they were in under grow lights and didn't like it. And so, but the end of this is finally starting to grow, and this will probably root where the nodes touch the ground. And so I'm just letting them do their thing. And so that's probably a different variety. And then the ones down here, you can see how yellow and upset this one is. So clearly this one really didn't like being planted out. That's the worst one of the batch. But all of these down here are a little bit smaller, a little bit more stressed. So it's just been interesting to watch. And what I'm hoping is that there will be a really obvious winner in terms of production as well. and that I'll be able to kind of pick a variety and stick with it from here on out. But it's been really, I've always just grown one kind of sweet potato at a time. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens here when I've got 3 different kinds in here. Tucked in on the end were just some onions that had gotten lost in my greenhouse when I was drying onions in there. And I found them this spring and they were starting to sprout, and so I stuck them in pots. These are a Cipollini onion, which I grow every year. And so I'm just gonna let these go to seed and pollinate, and then I'll collect the seed, and then I'll have some extra seed for Cipollinis. And then tucked in over in the end is a Queen Lime Zinnia that is just getting ready to bloom. And I love these, and they get pretty good sized, and so I'm giving her quite a bit of room. In the back here, we have comfrey that just reseeds and spreads on its own, and we chop it. You can see, hopefully you can see that we've chopped it at one point and let that dry down as a mulch, and then it's starting to sprout again, and so we'll chop it 2 or 3 times over the course of the year. In this back corner is horseradish, which is very happy this year. It's been a good year for horseradish. I'm not sure why they're so happy. This little tree is a pearmain, and we now have it on our drip system that's part of the raised beds. And so this one is doing better this year than it did last year. We're seeing some very nice growth out of that, which is very gratifying to see. And then tucked way back in the corner where it's not getting nearly enough sun and I need to dig up the whole plant and move it this fall is a rhubarb. Coming back over to these beds, this was lettuce and spinach, and it is now lettuce. The spinach has all been harvested, but it did quite well. I kept everything covered to keep the leaf miners off of it, and that was pretty successful. And so I got a really nice little spinach crop. I'm still eating it. I froze some of it, and then we've just been eating it in salads and occasionally throwing it into smoothies. These are hollyhocks that were actually in here last year that got pretty shaded out by all the other things that were in this bed and were crowded, and now they have overwintered and they're quite happy. And the 2 varieties of hollyhocks I have planted from seed, one of them is a double, and so it should be a double flower. And then the other one is a really dark, like almost black hollyhock. And I don't know which of these is which. I'm assuming, just based on the color of that bud, that this is gonna be one of the doubles because they are lighter in color. And then this one, I actually don't know, but they have really shot up in height. You know, they were so low that they were the size of the lettuce for a while, but they've really shot up, and it'll be interesting to see what these look like. My hollyhocks in this area, and actually this was true when I was living in Colorado as well, they never look great in terms of the plants. This is a type of rust, I believe, and the plants always look terrible. Yeah, you can really see the rust on that. And I don't fuss with them. They're kind of wild. They reseed themselves. And so I just let them be. I don't worry too much about it. And so far, so good. But the lettuce has been gorgeous, and we're coming to the end of the lettuce season. I need to get these out of here or they're gonna start to bolt. And I've eaten quite a bit and I've pulled quite a bit out of here, but I definitely need to pull the rest of this. A lot of this is butterhead. This is a type of butterhead. This is a type of butterhead. And so I probably will do some like lettuce wrap, Asian stir fry sort of stuff with some of those, where you wrap the contents in a lettuce leaf, along with obviously eating them in salads. And these will hold in my fridge if I cut them and wash them and put them in a fridge as a whole head. They will hold for 2 or 3 weeks before I have to toss them. And so we just basically, I do this every year where I plant way too much lettuce and then I end up with more than I can actually eat. So I'm gonna pick a bunch for a friend and take it to her house on Friday. And we're just gonna do our best to eat as much of this as we can. And then we will feed anything to the chickens that doesn't quite get eaten. Tucked into here in front of the peas are some cucumbers. So this is an Asian cucumber right there. There's 2 of them there. And then there's 1 right there. And I put them in because I know these peas are gonna be done fairly soon. And I didn't want to wait until the peas were pulled out before I put the cucumbers in. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to see how that works. There's an awful lot of competition in here right now for light. The other thing that I did just plant a couple of days ago is along the front of these peas is a long bean. And so those are the really long, like yard long beans. They don't taste like a regular green bean. They're a completely different thing. But we really liked them last year in stir fries, and they reminded me quite a bit of asparagus. And they were done once it got hot. They really didn't like a lot of heat. But this is the east side, and so this gets morning sun and afternoon shade. We'll see how it does. But those are also going to grow up as the peas conk out, so we'll see how that works. It may be a bad experiment. We'll see. But kind of fun to stack crops like that. My peas are all, you can see how this is off of the trellis and moved in. We had a lot of wind in the last couple of days, and so things should be all the way over here, but they got torn off the trellis by the wind. And I find that trying to move peas, once they've had that happen to them, you end up doing more damage to the plants by trying to move them back. And so I'm just letting them do their thing. But excited for some fresh shelling peas and some fresh snow peas. This is the cloth that I was using to cover the spinach to keep the leaf miners off, and it worked great, and I need to just pull it out of there and put it away for the season. And then in this bed, this is a greens bed, and so on the ends we have what's obviously Swiss chard, and this did not get protected from the leaf miners. And then we also had a hailstorm, and so can you see the damage? That's the leaf miner damage, and if I were to hold that up to the light, you would be able to see the larva in there. I'm just going to take this leaf off and feed it to the chickens. And then this big hole, all these holes in here, we had a small hailstorm and it poked holes in a lot of stuff. And so this is the damage that happens. Basically, the chard can usually outlast the leaf miners. They're a early spring issue, and then they kind of conk out and you don't see as much of them in the summer. And so I'm just basically letting the plants have problems with them right now because I've got enough other greens to eat that I really don't need a lot of chard, and they will recover and they'll be harvestable later in the season. I also have a couple of lacinato kales in here doing beautifully, and then a couple of red Russian kales, which I've just recently been starting to harvest and put into smoothies, and I usually freeze quite a bit of this as well, but this is a really delicious kale. And I just found an interesting thing, which is it wilts super easy, which is why you never see this at farmers markets, because it doesn't hold very well. Once it's picked, it tends to get wilty really fast. But I actually had some, and I was just in a hurry and I didn't have room in my fridge, and so I literally stuck it in a vase with water like it was a flower, and the leaf stayed perfect. It looked just like it did just now. And so maybe the trick to this is to actually treat it more like a flower and less like a vegetable. I don't know, but it worked. Couple of broccoli here, and we're just starting to get a little broccoli head in here. I did have a second broccoli planted here that should be as big as this one. Something happened with the stem where it got ringed and it just wasn't growing, and it had made no growth at all. And so I had an extra broccoli, and I ended up transplanting the extra broccoli into the bed and pulling that other one out. And so this one is a couple of weeks behind, which is fine. It's nice to stagger your crops. Broccoli, if you leave it in a pot too long, will stunt and you won't get a decent sized plant. But this seems to be growing pretty actively, so I'm excited to get some broccoli off of that, and I'm glad that I had an extra to put in there. And then next to this we have cabbage, and these are just starting to head up and they look absolutely fantastic. I didn't plant a lot of cabbage. I have 3 of them out in the big garden as well that were just extras. And I don't know if those are going to do anything because they were in pots for way too long and they don't seem to be actively growing. So I might not get anything out of that. And then the rest of this, I did harvest all of the bok choy. I did have bok choy in here. That has all been pulled, and we ate it in a bunch of different Asian stir-fry applications. This is another Asian green that is somewhat similar to bok choy or pak choy, and this one was the smallest of the bunch. It's still hanging in here. This one, I'll come around so you guys can see this. This one has bolted and gone to seed, and then I had a third one that I harvested that I have in an extra fridge, and it's a delicious green for stir-fries and things. But it was fun to grow it. I'd never grown it before, and so it was just fun to see. But look at you see Like there's a hole right there. Of course, that might also be from a chicken. But see the holes in these leaves? That's from the hail. We got a crazy hailstorm and it just beat the heck out of everything. And then on the end of this row, this is a Chinese sprouting broccoli. So basically it's like a broccolini. And at this point I have harvested, because I'm doing another video for you guys that has that ingredient in it. And I have harvested everything out here that was available. And so I'll probably get one more flush of crop off of this. And then these will be done and this end of this bed will be opened up. And then at the bottom of one of these other plants, it turned out there was an extra chard seed that just happened to be in there. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to leave that there or not. But right now there's a chard that I didn't plant that was just part of the pot of the thing that was in there. On the end here, this is Signet Marigold. These are edible and just lovely, and they smell really good. Just brushing against them smells amazing. And then obviously we have more of our Johnny Jump Ups, and I am just living for this color combination. I love the little Jump Ups and then the yellow marigolds. It's gorgeous and I am so here for it. Tucked on the end we have a California poppy. And then this is another dianthus that I don't know if is going to do anything. It accidentally got stepped on and so it's not very happy. And then the green stalk, and we have learned that we have to keep a fence around this when the strawberries start coming on because Charlie will eat them. I do have birds that get in here as well, but mostly it's the dogs. And I'm just starting to get strawberries. And none of them are terribly huge. I feel like they should be bigger, but definitely starting to get a little strawberry crop. And I have what I've determined at this point, I think, are 3 different kinds of strawberries in here. They're all everbearing, but I've got a bunch of different kinds. Actually, that's not true. Some of them might be June bearing. But yeah, strawberries coming on. And so I've just been coming out here in the mornings and eating a few every day, and they are delicious. So that's fun. And then let me show you guys a few other fun flowers that are around. Still getting a little bit of asparagus. Most of the asparagus looks like this. It's completely gone to seed at this point. But I've still got a couple small ones coming in here and there. And so I could probably get one more small meal out of what's out here. We've got perennial sweet peas, and these perennial sweet peas do not have any smell, which is so unfortunate because they are wildly prolific and they spread. And in fact, I've been ripping them out. I don't mind them being in this area because this is where we want them to be, kind of trellising up this fence. They tend to be a little bit invasive. This is going to be gorgeous right here. There's just going to be a whole bunch of them. So perennial sweet pea coming in there, competing with the hops. And this is the hop hedge, which has now become its monstrous self that it does every year. Great fun. And then in this little spot, and Michael, my husband, is supposed to put some rocks around this to give it a little bit more decoration, but these are the hibiscus. I don't know if you remember that I had some different hibiscus plants. One of them is a perennial that's just decorative, and then the other one is, it's actually a hibiscus that you make hibiscus tea out of. And so, going to be annual in our climate, but I'm hoping for a crop out of this. We'll see how it does. These plants got devastated by the chickens. The first day that we had this in, they got out and got in here and decided to dig through this entire wood pile and dug up several plants. I started out with 3 of one, 5 of another, and now I'm down to 2 of one and 3 of another. So I've lost a couple of them to chickens, and then this one just died, and I don't know why. I'm not sure what happened here, but this one is just obviously a goner. And they haven't been particularly happy because they were in the greenhouse where it was warm. And then I planted them out because I didn't want them to be in pots any longer because they were going to get root bound, and they were not quite ready for the temperature that we had. And so they look terrible right now for the most part, but we'll see. You know, it's just an experiment. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Another poppy tucked in here. I just had random poppies all over the place. This is volunteer oregano, by the way. And this is the Greek oregano. If you ever plant one Greek oregano and you're in the right climate, you will never be without it. It doesn't have the intensity of the flavor of an Italian oregano, but it reseeds and it's all over the place, and I basically will never be without it again, which I'm fine with. And so it just kind of pops up in different places out here. This is an almond tree, and last year we actually got a crop out of it, which was very exciting. And I'm not sure, we didn't even get a blossom out of it this year. So no almonds this year, but I had some extra nasturtiums. And so I've just tucked the nasturtiums in around the base of this almond. And they are just starting to bloom. And so I'm very pleased with that. I think it's going to be really pretty to just have them kind of cascading out of here onto the ground. And we've heavily wood mulched this just last year to keep the weeds down. And I've been ripping out handfuls of that perennial sweet pea and bindweed. So we're trying to let the nasturtiums get a foothold and not have to compete with every other weed on the planet. This, speaking of things that have become weedy, this is a yarrow. It's an ornamental yarrow, so not the white one, but the colored one. And that also is almost like a ground cover out here. It's just spread over the years. Great fun. So I think I'll show you a couple more things that are blooming on this side of the yard, and then tomorrow morning I'll come out and show you the big garden. So this is sage. This is a culinary sage, and this is probably about a 10-year-old plant. It's been in this spot for a very long time, and we have cut it back and cut it back and cut it back, and it just keeps going. But beautiful when it blooms this time of year. I actually think people should use this as a landscape plant more than they do, because it's so gorgeous and just covered in pollinators. And so great fun. I don't use a ton of sage in my cooking. I use a little bit, but very, very pretty. And sage is a type of salvia. Culinary sage is a salvia. And so basically it's related to all the other salvias that we use as ornamental decoration. And so no reason we couldn't do that with this as well. This is valerian. And so valerian is a, hello bee, who's probably a little bit stoned there. See if I can get a good picture of her. There, that's pretty good. But valerian is a herb that they refer to as nature's Valium. And so it's a very good herb for anxiety. The one issue with it, well, two issues with it. One is the part that you actually harvest and use is the root, which means that you basically have to kill the plant in order to harvest it. And so it's not something that you can just get a ton of because of that, but it's very pretty this time of year. The other problem with it is it will, and I mean, it's a pro and a con, because if you want a lot of it, you're going to have a lot of it. It reseeds like crazy. And so the first year that I grew this, it did this and I just left the blooms. And the second year I had valerian coming up absolutely everywhere. And so I have learned that I let these bloom, I let the pollinators get a nice treat, and then I cut these off before they actually go to seed. We still have a few of them here and there around the yard that I've missed over the years, but this is the one patch that we've allowed to grow. And so this patch of valerian has been in this area for 10 years going on, but we have a few extras just in random places around the yard. It does have a fairly strong odor, and it's kind of floral mixed with feet. And so it's nice, but it's not fantastic. Here is my beautiful, beautiful petunias that just make me incredibly happy. I love this color of petunias so much. And I was so happy that I was actually able to find it this year. And then my marigolds that I grew from seed and that I've saved seed from and regrown. These guys are blooming gloriously. And this will probably bloom most of the season. And they are just so pretty. This one has little red specks. This one is butter yellow. And I don't know if I have ever seen a marigold that was this bright. It's almost neon. It's so bright. And so I'm just getting, it's funny, for years I didn't really like marigolds that much, and my husband loves them. And so we would always kind of have a battle about whether or not to plant a lot of marigolds. And now I've kind of fallen in love with them just this last couple of years. So Yeah, gorgeous and really fun. And then I have some big marigolds out in the big garden as well. This is our lavender. There's 3 of them in this bed, and I had to cut them way, way back because I lost a ton of growth on them from the cold that we had last year. Parts that survived are blooming, and they are just lovely, and I'll probably harvest a handful and bring them in the house just for smell. But it's nice to see that. I'm glad they're blooming. I have volunteer snapdragons. I had snapdragons in a pot last year, and so now I've got baby volunteers. This is calendula that was also in a pot last year that's reseeded. There's another snapdragon tucked in there that's reseeded. So the reseeding is always an adventure. This is a poppy that reseeded itself. I'm not even sure where that seed came from. And then I've got a couple of more lavenders in here. One of them I lost altogether, but this one, lots of flowers. So this is last year's growth. And then this is all this year's new growth. So no flowers. It'll be interesting to see if this flowers this year, but lots of new growth. I love the foliage smells great, even if the flower itself isn't blooming. This is columbine, and this columbine has been in here for years and reseeds, and so I get little columbine babies all over the place. I have an interesting spider happening there. I think that's a spider. But this is the blue columbine. I think it's actually the state flower in Colorado. And we used to see them in the wild there, and I just absolutely loved them. And so it took me years to find seed for just blue and not all the popcorn colors. But I'm very, very pleased that that plant is there, and it makes me happy every year. This is the rose bush that I talked about in my May video, where this plant was like double this size, and we had a ton of it die off last winter. But the part that survived is now blooming, and I'm definitely getting some insect damage. I don't really care. I'm not fussy about my roses, but can you see the holes there in the leaves? When this is a bud, there's an actual insect that has a piercing little mouth part, and it will poke into the bud itself. And so when the flower opens, you see all the holes where it's poked through. And so that's what's happening there. But I'm very pleased. We also mulched the heck out of this year and put some cardboard down because there's a terrible infestation of bindweed in here. And so I'm slowly trying to get a handle on the bindweed and keep it from climbing up the center of the plant. Bindweed is perennial. It has roots that go to China. Its seeds are viable for something like 40 years, and I'm not kidding about that. That's not hyperbole, that's actually truth. And so it's very, very hard to control. But we do what we can. We stress it out. We keep pulling it. And hopefully, eventually, we just exhaust it. This is called Mordant Rose, and it's a very unfussy rose. It has huge rose hips. If you're the kind of person who wants to harvest rose hips, that's very doable with this rose, and it smells wonderful, and it's just gorgeous. The color makes me very, very happy. This is called Flashback Calendula, and I had some very old seed, and I didn't get a lot of it to germinate, but I had a few, and then it reseeds everywhere, and so it's not like I don't have a lot of these already, but I just threw these in the ground because I had a little bit of extra space. You can tell I like to put plants at the ends of things just as a bumper, and these make me happy. I just love them. They're so gorgeous. And then here's our sunflowers that are going to be a sunflower wall probably in a month. And so take note of the size here. We will see what this looks like in July, but they're coming along nicely. And even with all of that wind, and we had a ton of wind yesterday and the day before, these did not fall over, which bodes well for how they're going to be doing. All right, you guys, we will see you out in the big garden in the morning. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.